Our next practice problem is looking at a reaction between copper oxide, which is like a greenish chemical, reacting with carbon to form pure copper and carbon dioxide. So this is what is done to help purify copper ore. So looking at the formula, I've got copper, oxygen, and carbon on both sides of my equation. And I have a subscript 2 after the copper, so that tells me that there are 2 copper atoms. No subscript after the oxygen, so that tells me 1, and same thing for carbon. Looking over here, copper is all by itself on the product side, so 1. Oxygen has a 2 after it, and carbon has a 1. Wow, so these are really not balanced, are they? So I think the first thing that I'm going to do to try to balance these is just taking a quick look. I know that the carbon and the copper will be really easy to balance because they're by themselves later on. So that's pretty simple. So I'm going to leave those alone and deal with those after. I'm looking at copper. It's going to be really easy to balance because it's going to be by itself later. Oxygen is involved in both those molecules. So oxygen is going to be a little bit trickier. So I'm going to try balancing that first. So I look at the oxygen on these two, and I've got 1 over on the reactants and 2 on the products. So what I'm going to try to do here is actually add another oxygen over here by adding a whole nother molecule of copper oxide. And by doing that, I now have 4 copper, which is fine, more unbalanced, but we'll deal with it later, and 2 oxygen. So now my oxygens are balanced, so that's looking pretty good. Now looking at things, carbon is balanced, so that's okay. Now my oxygen's balanced, that's okay. Now copper is really not balanced. So what can I do to balance this? I've got 4 copper on my reactants and only 1 on my products. So if I add a 4 right here, that is going to bring my count up to 4, and now it's balanced. So what this says is 2 copper oxide molecules react with 1 carbon to yield or make 4 copper atoms and 1 carbon dioxide.